Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about three more trigonometric functions, the secant, the cosecant, and the cotangent. Now, these functions are reciprocals of other functions we already know, which means if we know the cosine of a value, we now can find the secant of a value by taking the reciprocal of the cosine function. So the secant is the reciprocal of the cosine function, the cosecant is the reciprocal of the sine function, and the cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent function. So we're going to see a lot of the same numbers, except our fraction is going to be flipped. And once again, the denominator of a fraction can never be zero, so if the denominator happens to be zero, then our function is undefined. Here's a quick look to remember that sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. So as long as we can remember that, we can then also find secant, cosecant, and cotangent. So here's an example if I give you an angle. Without using a calculator, evaluate secant of 7 pi over 6. So there's a few things I need to think about when I'm looking at this angle and looking at secant. Secant, we need to remember, is the reciprocal of the cosine function. So instead of the secant function, I want to look at 1 divided by the cosine of 7 pi over 6. Now we're going to go back to thinking about our unit circle. And 7 pi over 6 is in quadrant 3. And cosine is negative because cosine is the x value. So I drew a unit circle. Please continue to do this to think about where we are on the unit circle. So I'm looking at this x value, the long x value. We know it's negative, and it's the big one, so it's square root of 3 over 2. So now I have this fraction, 1 divided by negative square root of 3 divided by 2. And I have a fraction and another fraction, two fractions together, which I don't like. So I'm going to have to use algebra to make it look prettier. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the reciprocal, which means flip this fraction, flip the square root of 3 over 2. And I'm going to wind up with negative 2 divided by square root of 3. Now this answer is still fine, but in math we tend to not like square roots in our denominator. So what we do is rationalize the denominator by multiplying both the denominator and the numerator by that square root of 3. So that when we do square root of 3 times square root of 3 in the denominator, we get 3. And the numerator then has the square root in it, because negative 2 times the square root of 3 cannot be simplified or rewritten in any other form. And that would be our final answer. So the secant of 7 pi over 6 exactly is negative 2 square root of 3 over 3.